Hello everyone, good morning again. I am Madhvi, I am from Hyderabad. I work for an organization called as ADP in Hyderabad as an agile coach. And I'm back on the Hangout series of the Regional Scrum Gathering India. So we have taken a small break and we again restarted the Hangouts. And I'm from the volunteer team, by the way, of this the gathering. And today we have Alex with us on the episode 7 of the Hangout series. And the topic of the day is Art and Science of Facilitation. So before we get into the Hangout, let me take a minute to quickly talk about the logistics of the day. I and Alex will be having conversations around the Hangout topic. And meanwhile, if the viewers have any questions for us, they would like to ask Alex, you can just tweet using the Twitter hashtag RSGI2017. And we will be taking your questions at the end of the Hangout. And I'll take a minute again to talk about what progress we are making on the Regional Scrum Gathering India. So the gathering is really getting shaped up very well. And some of the highlights of the gathering are like, we are planning to host a coaches clinic where we have coaches and you all can come and talk to them. And you like something, I mean, what does this resonate with you? It looks like something Mela, right? So we are coming up with a unique concept called as Agile Marketplace, Aka the Agile Mela or Agile Santhai, whatever you call it as. And it has a lot of activities and refreshments, fun-filled games around the agility concept, around theme of the conference. So I think this is something that you should never miss. And I'm really looking forward to be part of this event. And again, to say like you have some exciting goodies also for people participating in this Agile Santhai. And then let me also talk about the keynote session. So we have 2 keynotes. The first keynote is from Ravi Singh. He's a cultural diplomat and author and a pilot. So, we have a keynote from him on day 2. And on day 1 also we have a keynote. But instead of you listening to one speaker, you will get to listen to 5 speakers. And the keynote will be in a mashup style. Each speaker will get around 8 minutes to talk about a topic. And I think this is really different concept that we are trying in the Regional Scrum Gathering. And I think you should really not miss it. And what more? So these are some of the highlights of the upcoming regional gathering. And yes, I forgot. We also have a leadership panel on day 2, where you'll be talking, to eminent leaders in the industry. You can listen to their views, ask your questions, and we have a hot chair wherein someone can come from the audience and also ask questions and sit in the leadership panel and participate. So having said that. If you have not yet registered for the gathering that is happening on September 6th and 7th in Bangalore, I think it is a time for you all to register and we all look forward to meet you there. So let me now, without any delay, give it over to Alex. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself for the benefit of all our viewers today?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alistair Sloley. Most people call me Alex. You can call me Alex when you meet me at the Scrum Gathering in India. So I'm happy to be here today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am an Agile coach, and I was primarily working in the United States and Europe. I did a bunch of transformations at a bunch of big companies. A sampling of my clients have included Cisco, Nordstrom, Intel. I've worked in a broad variety of industries. I did Agile transformation at Shell, which is oil and gas. I did it at Genentech, which is pharma. So I've done a lot of different industries, and I've done a lot of Agile transformations, both with Scrum and scaled Scrum, lean concepts, as well as Kanban. And right now I am in Australia. That's my base of operations now. I'm currently at a client in Sydney, Australia, and I live in Canberra, Australia. And I'm part of the Australian community now. And I'm starting to branch out into Asia and India and talking to people there and having a great time. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to coming to India. I've never actually been to India before, so I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it, meeting all of you, as well as experiencing the culture. It's going to be a great time. So I'm here today to talk about facilitation, and that's one of the things that I try to leverage in my own personal Agile coaching, and it's a capability I'm always trying to expand.
Oh, that's great. It's nice to hear from you, and it's great that you've not come to India so far, and this is your first time, and we all really look forward to meeting you and talking to you. And okay, Alex, coming to the topic of the day, right? Facilitation. I think this is really very important, but it is because it is a crux of any conversations, any organization at any level, be it the team level or leadership or a management level.
Right.
Now, yeah. So when you talk about facilitation, Alex, can you help me understand? I mean, what does actually facilitation mean? Is it just about hosting the meetings or something beyond that? I mean, can you just explain? Take a minute to help us understand what is the depth and breadth of this facilitation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as the Scrum community, we all understand that Scrum Masters inherently are kind of the owners of facilitating the team's success. And that can be, pretty trivial stuff, or I guess you could call it trivial stuff, from facilitating a stand-up meeting to facilitating difficult conversations. So to be an effective Scrum Master, to be a great Scrum Master, yeah, those people tend to be really good at facilitation. And like you said, facilitation, what is it really? It's about enabling dialogue, perhaps between two people or maybe a team or multiple teams or perhaps an entire company or organization. So as you progress naturally into an agile coach through the Scrum Master path, you kind of have to develop your facilitation techniques because as an agile coach, you tend to elevate up and away and around multiple Scrum teams and perhaps an entire organization. So you have to start learning facilitation techniques that not only enable small teams, but large groups and perhaps distributed teams. And the art of facilitation is one of the four stances that any agile coach should be able to step into. If you define an agile coach as being able to coach, mentor, teach, then facilitation is one of those four things a great agile coach needs to have experience in and get good at.
Great. These are really great insights. So again, Alex, who are the different personas who you think should be mastering this art of facilitation? Because I believe facilitation is, I just can't, get it by reading books. I think we should really practice it to understand. So who all do you think are the personas who should really invest in, learning this facilitation? And
definitely,
who are the people who actually do this? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the leadership within the organization. So what does leadership mean? We'll get to that in a second, but absolutely the Scrum Masters on each team should learn the art of facilitation. The way you see this expressed most commonly are Scrum Masters who really have great, productive, interesting retrospectives. I think the retrospective perhaps where your facilitation techniques really can be leveraged and come into play. When you're a Scrum Master on a team and you're running a stand-up, you got to be pretty good at keeping them on track within the 15-minute time box. But in a retrospective where there's a lot of dynamics at play and you might be talking about contentious issues or problems between team members, facilitation really comes into play. On top of that, if you're a leader in your organization, perhaps a manager outside the scope of the Scrum teams, right? In my concept of Scrum and scaling Scrum in large organizations, managers transition into like a servant leader type role. Managers are kind of like Scrum Masters without a Scrum team, and that they remove impediments, they facilitate conversations. I expect managers to be good at facilitation as well. And then when it comes to agile coaches, I think it's critical because coaches, whether or not they're at the individual team level or the multi-team level or the org or executive level, are modeling facilitation techniques such that the other coaches and other Scrum Masters who are learning from them in the organization can learn how to facilitate. It's like facilitating the training of future facilitators.
Correct. I mean, that's great. Yes. I mean, as you said, like this facilitation is really a vast thing. And I think, there are different levels for us to master and all. So that said, Alex, I mean, can we categorize these facilitation techniques like into different categories, applicable to maybe these facilitation techniques are useful to Scrum Masters, or these are a bunch that can be used by product owners, or these are a bunch that can be used by coaches or leadership. Do we have any categories as such, or is it like they're common and can be used by anyone?
I think the best facilitation techniques tend to be, I don't want to say generic, but they tend to be kind of abstracted away from the concept of what level they're being used at. So the really good facilitation techniques, really you can use at any level with anybody. And there's a bunch of different types in terms of like the actual exercises and facilitation techniques themselves. The sky's the limit. You Google facilitation techniques and you'll get thousands and thousands of results in your result set. And I try to achieve one, or try to invest in ones that I can use pretty much anywhere, anytime.
Okay, that's good. So Alex, why don't you share some of the facilitation techniques which are specifically useful for agile coaches, for few for Scrum Masters and maybe the product owners, so that I'm sure some of our viewers are agile coaches or could be playing the role of Scrum Masters, because that is the kind of audience generally we get for our hangouts. So it would be really helpful if you can talk about specific techniques that will be really helpful for coaches or Scrum Masters or maybe the product owners.
Yeah, I think the Scrum Master level techniques of individual team tend to focus on team dynamics and team interactions. So they are generally facilitation techniques designed for teams or small groups to have conversations. The ones that are useful for agile coaches not only include those, but also tend to be large group techniques as well as distributed techniques. Right now, I am working in a large financial institution in Sydney, helping them with their agile transformation. And the organization I'm currently in is 450 people, about 2/3 located here in Sydney and the other third in development centers in India. So just this week, I'm leading a session, a facilitated session for 450 people, both in Australia and India. And I think when you become an agile coach, you start to elevate up into the large groups, and the techniques have to be able to be used in a distributed fashion. And they tend to be less focused on the team and more general and broad. And then there's another set of techniques entirely for perhaps leadership, where you have to consider short time constraints based on their availability, what they do and don't know about Agile, and perhaps their tolerance level for working with these kind of facilitated techniques. They tend to be very driven people, and you have to be cognizant of who your audience is when you're using facilitation techniques. Yeah.
So, Alex, where can I actually look for these facilitation techniques? Is there a place where I can, read about them? Because suppose I'm starting as a Scrum Master, and I would really like to, read about them, and because I'm sure you can't explain all of them in just this 30 minutes of hangout. So, can you help me with some links or some good books wherein I can just read about them, and maybe I can start using them, and slowly I learn about them.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of facilitation techniques that are basically off the shelf. They all have similar roots in that they are all trying to achieve the same thing, but experienced practitioners, and they're not all in Agile. A lot of facilitative techniques have nothing to do with Agile and have come from other industries like consulting and formal teaching, like university or primary school teaching. They all have facilitation techniques which you can consider and perhaps leverage in your application. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Agile, right? So you can go out and Google it, and you'll find a bunch of ones. But the ones that I hear about most commonly, and they all have these like names and titles, essentially. These names of these facilitation techniques really are just a naming scheme to that aggregate certain techniques together. So I'll give you some examples. The one I'm talking about at the Scrum Gathering in India are called liberating structures. And the liberating structures is 36 facilitation techniques, and I'll be going over some of those. But there are other ones out there. For example, there's the core protocols. If you Google the core protocols by the McCarthys, it's a set of facilitation techniques that was developed by Jim McCarthy. If you look at innovation games are really just a set of facilitation techniques. And earlier you asked about what might be appropriate in different settings.
Correct.
I find that innovation games are really great for product owners who are working with stakeholders who are trying to figure out the requirements or the stories for a particular product, because the innovation games tend to be kind of very product specific. And if you've ever played like the buy a feature game and stuff like that, that comes from innovation games. There are other ones. There's Deep Democracy. Deep Democracy developed out of the political movement in South Africa during apartheid, when there was a lot of contention around apartheid, and there was a political revolution in South Africa, and deep democracy techniques were developed there as facilitation techniques to enable political discussions. So another common one you hear about a lot lately is the growth mindset set of facilitation techniques. And the growth mindset is a set of principles and theories and philosophy around how you facilitate school children to have an open mind and to experiment and learn. So there's a lot of different places you can go to look for facilitation techniques. And I encourage you to go out there and Google it and just examine the breadth of what's available, and don't confine yourself just to Agile.
Yes, that's great. And I think you mentioned about innovation games, and I do agree innovation games are a great toolkit. I've been using innovation games a lot for facilitating retrospectives, especially when my teams are distributed. I know I use their forums, and I think they're really great. I've used them a lot. Yeah. And Alex, so you just mentioned about liberating structures, right?
Yeah.
When I look at the name liberating structures, right? I mean, it doesn't resonate to me that it has something to do with facilitation, right? It looks to be like, some structure or a monument. So I was just keen to understand, how did they get this name, liberating structures? And I mean, you're talking about a structure, and then again, you're talking about facilitation. So is there any link between facilitation and these structures? I mean, a little bit of, some info behind this.
Yeah. I think they chose liberating structures because it sounded cool, like the core protocols and liberating structures. They sound neat, and you want something, for marketing people can remember and all that kind of thing. But it actually does have roots in actually what they were trying to achieve with liberating structures. So the story goes, these two guys, and I'll talk about these two guys later at the workshop, came up with a set of repeatable processes off the shelf that you could use for facilitation. And their description of facilitation, their definition of facilitation was the liberation of people involved in discussion. So that's why it began with liberating, because they were freeing people to be able to discuss things. And then they called it structures because their conclusion they came to was the fact that there are key ingredients and key repeatable ingredients that are common across facilitation techniques. And they called these key repeatable ingredients structures. And these structures can be used across multiple facilitation techniques. So when they're using them, what they're saying is that there's these key structures that if you memorize, you can then use to leverage future facilitation techniques, because you'll find commonality between them.
Okay. Great. So I was always, thinking of what are these liberating structures, and what is the link between a structure and a facilitation. And I think your explanation really helped me on that. So Alex, I mean, I'm sure you must have used a lot of techniques from these liberating structures toolkit. Can you just help us with one or two techniques which you think really work well for you, given the scenario or maybe the context of the teams that we work with, just for the benefit of our audience, so that we actually get a taste of, what kind of techniques are really available in this toolkit.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's a nice breadth of techniques in liberating structures, and it's not a static set. They are adding new techniques as they define them. There are currently, I believe, 36 liberating structures, and essentially, that's quite a few, right? And what they've done is essentially built a menu for you to go look at these 36 liberating structures and kind of discover what they're doing. And they all have slightly different purposes, but all with the common goal of enabling conversation. So in general, what practitioners of liberating structures tend to do is start to use the more commonly used ones because they're relatively easy to do. So those are actually the ones that I've targeted for demonstrating and having at the workshop in India. And as you gain confidence and get better with the basic ones, you start to explore the more complex and complicated ones. They all have slightly different purposes. I'll give you a sample of one that I probably won't be doing in India, but just to give you a flavor, there's one called Triz, and Triz, I believe, if I recall my history correctly, Triz is a Russian term, something to do with disaster. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know the history of every single liberating structure, but the way the liberating structure works, this Triz, which is just a cool name for it, is essentially the facilitator works with a group of people and invites them to imagine the worst possible outcome of what they're working on right now. It gets people thinking about what could possibly go wrong, and it then flips it on its head and asks the facilitator to help the people there then come up with the things and the ways and the stuff they're going to do to stop the worst possible outcome from happening. So that's one liberating structure. It does involve a lot of micro time boxing. So if you're into Scrum and Agile, right, you know all about time boxes. Really narrows it down into where you're doing steps in a facilitation technique, which might only be a minute or 2 or 3. And a good facilitator really has to be focused and manage those time boxes because you want to get through these facilitation techniques in a reasonable amount of time.
Correct, exactly. I think I have used a variant of this Triz in one of the workshops wherein I asked the people to, and I think it was a product owner workshop. So I was asking the product owners to come up with the ways they could screw up the backlog. And they were really excited and they came up with a big list, and then we summarized that, hey guys, I think this is what you should not be doing as a product owner.
Right.
And it's really fun. I think it resonates. Triz resonates with what I've done. So I think maybe that was Triz. I didn't know the name of it.
Yeah, well, all these facilitation techniques, regardless of their titles, all tend to have very common roots. So once you start to get into facilitation techniques, you start to see a lot of commonality between the different techniques, even though they might be named differently. And perhaps their roots might be, thousands of years ago in ancient Greece with the philosophers Socrates and Plato. I don't know, but I think they're consistent and they have themes across them because they make sense.
Correct. And so this was a great example, Alex. I want to share, one of the, difficulty that I have, or or where I really want to learn. So generally when I'm working with teams, right, I come across a distributed team structure. I think that is common scenario nowadays. So it's like I'm working in a business unit and I have 10 teams, or say 5 teams or 15 teams, and I'm working with them as an agile coach. And many times I get into a situation where I really would like all of these 2 teams to get together and talk about their problems and discuss and come up with solutions to their own problems. So I was always, and I really, almost even now, I have a hard time in facilitating conversations when the teams are really distributed, and I'm talking at scale. So do you have something in liberating structures that really help, when the teams are distributed across geographies?
That's a big challenge for a lot of teams, just in general, having, as soon as you're distributed, right, there's some kind of tooling involved
Yeah.
to facilitate the facilitation, I guess. There is nothing in liberating structures per se that makes it easier or more accomplishable in a distributed fashion. So the facilitation techniques themselves are kind of independent of how that happens. So one of the things you're going to have to consider when you start getting into facilitation techniques is how appropriate is it for a distributed team situation. Now, a lot of the techniques in that I use are generally better when they're in a co-located team. You might be using physicality somehow, like sticky notes, walking around, talking to people face to face, which is really hard to do when you're distributed. So generally what I'm looking for when I'm using liberating structures are techniques that can be easily accomplished using some kind of tool set like Skype or a virtual whiteboard. And the other one is to train up or help people learn liberating techniques in the distributed locations. So the distributed locations can have their own facilitation sessions that they can focus on there, and then you can kind of get all that information together and brought up to, in a whole later. But I generally find that doing the facilitation on site in those specific locations will have the best results.
Okay. And then collect the data from the different sites and maybe share in a common forum, and then, have it on the forum. Again, it could be some online forum, and then you discuss.
Exactly.
There's no straightforward way wherein I can, facilitate distributed team conversations. Try different things and see what works for them.
Yeah, and definitely that's the whole purpose of this workshop in India that I'm leading, in that I find that facilitation techniques are always easier to learn and consume when you've had someone show you how to do it or helped you through it first. Yeah. It's just that initial barrier to get over that gives you enough comfort and confidence to kind of take it from there. But once you've seen it done once or twice, you can kind of jump in and do it yourself after that.
Okay, great. Alex, again, so I also have, one more scenario that comes to my mind. There was a engagement where I was coaching, and like we wanted to do an organization level retrospective across the organization for, I think it was about 40 to 50 teams, to just get the pulse of how the agile transformation was going on. So for doing this organization level retrospectives, we actually used innovation games at that time, wherein forums were organized and the forums were facilitated. We had facilitators, and it was like very quickly done in a period of 1 week. We used to, we could actually get the data from each and every team member, and we could automatically download it and collate the data. So it was very quick, and and we also had the post processing facility in the innovation games, wherein it actually showed us the patterns and everything. So do we have such kind of automation inbuilt in these liberating structures, or is it all manual?
It is all manual. It is all very high touch, person led, and it's not like the innovation games. You know how the innovation games, they have like an online component, which is kind of separate from the whole philosophy and implementation of innovation games. Liberating structures are very hands-on.
Okay, great. Any experience you have, Alex, that you would like to share with us? Wherein you think liberating structures really helped you? Any critical scenario, anything that you really cannot forget, and you you feel really good about it, that you would like to share with us, wherein these liberating structures were really helpful to you?
Yeah, I think there are liberating structures that can kind of encourage people who might not usually talk to say something. So I've always found them, I've found them particularly useful when you're in a situation, an organizational or team situation, where certain people might not talk for whatever reason. Perhaps they're shy, or they're introverted, or they don't feel safe. And I think these techniques tend to help these people vocalize and talk when they might not otherwise. So I found them especially useful in retrospectives. The other places I find them especially useful are when you're conducting workshops. Perhaps you might be working with stakeholders and your product owner or product owners to define a backlog. It's really good for just getting conversation going. And the venues and ceremonies where you want talking, it's really good for that.
So, Alex, when you just mentioned that they are helpful in doing retrospectives. So when you say they're helpful in retrospectives, are these liberating structures, I mean, do they have some inbuilt different techniques like Diana Larson's sailboat or something like that? Or do they just talk about how to facilitate the retrospectives to make them engaging? So what do they actually address?
Yeah, I think what they do is they provide a framework for you to help people talk, is essentially what it comes down to. So they're independent of the whole retrospective format, right? If you're looking at Esther Derby's steps of what you're trying to achieve in a retrospective, I think it helps you complete or accomplish those things she's talking about.
Oh, okay, got it. Alex, I think now, I mean, so these liberating structures, they really sound to be very interesting, and I think there's a lot more for us to read and research about these liberating structures. So are they available somewhere over the net? I mean, where I can read all the 36 techniques, or do I have to buy a book or read something like that?
Right. Yeah. So liberating structures are Creative Commons, and what that means, it's freely available for you to use as long as you use attribution, right? It's a Creative Commons license. And it is freely available online at liberatingstructures.com. And it's got all the information you need there, for everything from the history to the actual, like a menu of all the liberating structures with all the, you could call them recipes or instructions of how to accomplish those liberating structures. On top of that, there's a book. There is a book, and you can order it from Amazon, and you don't have to buy it, but it's a great reference to have on your shelf when you need something to flip through really quick. It's a great reference. And in addition, just recently, a mobile application has been created for it as well, which provides similar type access through your mobile device to the liberating structures. So it's all out there and all pretty easy to find and to discover. And then I'll be there in India to help you or the other attendees go through their first liberating structures with me so they can get a taste for it. And the very next day they go back to work, they will be able to immediately apply any of the liberating structures that I've shown them.
Okay. That will be really great. I think it will be a great experience to join your workshop. And I think, but now I have $1 million question for you, right? You're saying that the liberating structures are available online. I am a Creative Commons license and I can read through them. Then why should I come and attend your workshop?
Yeah, because I'm lowering that barrier for you to figure out how to do the first couple of ones. You know, facilitation techniques are great. You go out there, there's lots of open source ones. They're all freely available. And when you read through them, like the instructional steps on how to do them, sometimes it can be easy to get confused and not know what you're doing and you're stumbling through it. Essentially, what I'm offering you is a practice round where you can actually practice it in the safety of all your other Agile peers, and with me to guide you through it, so you can do it in a safe place, practice it once. So when you go back to the office, you'll be a lot more confident, and you can essentially replicate what you did at the conference at your office effectively.
I agree. I mean, that's really helpful. See, because otherwise, it's very easy to read theory and we think we understood everything. But, many times even I face this challenge. When I read it, seems to be very simple. But when I go and try to implement, it's like, oh, it's all Greek and Latin. I'm lost somewhere. Right. And what you've said is really right. And I think I will not miss your workshop for sure, at least. And I'm sure our audience also will join us.
I'd love to have you there.
And Alex, again, I think you are also doing one more workshop, if I'm not wrong, at Regional Scrum Gathering, right? It's a talk, not a workshop.
Yeah, it's a presentation.
Yeah, so what is that about? I think it is something around retrospectives, if I'm not sure, but can you just let us know what is your second talk that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a presentation style session on
Hmm?
extraordinary retrospectives.
Oh,
Uh,
retrospectives is my favorite topic. That's
yeah,
great.
there's a lot of people who are really into refining their capabilities and retrospectives, and I
Hmm?
think it's because many agilists would say that the retrospective really is a critical part of the feedback cycle, because without it, how are you going to make the process and the team and the working together better?
Hmm?
And that's the mechanism that you make it better with, right?
And Alex, you mentioned about, I think I saw it, I saw on the website. So the title says something called as extraordinary retrospectives, if I'm not wrong. Am I right?
Yes.
So I was, very keen to understand, what is that you will do? What is that you're going to, talk to us about? What that makes our ordinary retrospectives and extraordinary ones?
Yeah. I think, it comes down to uh, an ordinary retrospective. If you go
Hmm?
into an organization, if you go into a team and a company, an ordinary retrospective can be
Hmm?
kind of boring. It can
Hmm?
also be unproductive. So,
Hmm?
and in fact, the reason I use the term ordinary retrospective is because I've seen a lot of boring, non-productive retrospectives in my agile lifetime, right? And I think
Yeah.
people like you and people like me and other people going to this conference don't want it to be like that. They want it to be
I had a
extraordinary,
yeah.
right? So I'll be talking about simple things you can do to make them
Hmm.
extraordinary, and that they won't be boring and they won't be unproductive. That's really what I'm hoping to convey in my session is how do you not be boring and how do you not be unproductive.
Okay, that will be great. I think this is something which will really help all the scrum masters, agile coaches, because I think retrospectives is one of the key aspect that every team gets into, and and it is a very common symptom that over time they get boring, and people just stop doing it.
Right.
And even I tried a lot of techniques. Even I really had a hard time in making these interesting, and even now when I do it right, I always think of what can I do different, and I really get stuck sometimes.
Well, I think, asking yourself, what can I do differently to make it better is a healthy thing, right? And
Correct.
regardless of what you eventually decide to end up doing, I think the asking yourself, what can I do to make the retrospective better, which is kind of like saying, or asking, how do I make the mechanism to make things better? I think that's a good sign, right?
Yeah. Okay, Alex, let us take a minute to just check if we have any questions from our audience of the day. Let me just check once.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we have one question. Alex, what are the challenges of liberating structures? I see liberating structures is a great toolkit, but do they have any limitations and challenges?
Definitely they have limitations and challenges. Going back to one of the previous questions about distributed facilitation, they don't particularly address whether or not you're distributed or not. And definitely some of them I would outright say they would be very difficult to do in a distributed fashion. So if you're
Okay.
working in a distributed model, some of these
Hmm.
may not be appropriate, and you'll have to figure out which ones will work for you and which ones will not.
Okay.
In addition, the other big barrier is when you read the instructions for some of the liberating structures, like you said before, it'll kind of make sense. And then when you try to do it, all of a sudden it'll be confusing and you'll struggle with it, right? So I think
Correct.
that's one of the key messages I convey in my workshop, and that I'll convey here, is that if you're going to try some liberating structures or any other facilitation techniques, practice them first. And you don't need to get perfect, but I would practice them at least once with some
Okay.
trusted people, maybe other agile coaches, for example, and then try it out so that you get a taste for it and you get better at it.
Okay. That's good. Thank you. Thanks for answering that. I think, yeah, we have one more question here. As a product owner, are there any techniques in the liberating structures that will help me in managing my product backlog better?
There are no product-specific liberating structures, not like innovation games. I would say if you're going to be using facilitation techniques that involve the product backlog specifically, innovation games is a really great set of protocols in that it's very product-specific, right? The liberating structures tend to be more about team dynamics rather than product backlog. However, a product owner may find themselves in a situation where they have to manage the dynamics or facilitate a conversation amongst stakeholders who are deciding or who are deciding what the backlog contains with the product owner. In that case, I would say the liberating structures does offer something for product owners in that it helps them have conversations with their stakeholders.
Okay, good. Let me check if we have anything else. Yeah, I think, yeah, one more we have. I'm a Scrum Master, and I often find it difficult for making people talk. There are few members in my team who never open up. So, apart from the normal way of using sticky notes, is there anything different that I can try so that everyone opens up?
Yeah, like I was saying before, I've found liberating structures for me personally to be very effective in that particular situation. When you get good at facilitation, you tend to kind of make the facilitation technique look natural. So when I'm using liberating structures or any other facilitation technique, really, in a team or organizational setting, sometimes I don't tell them the name of the technique or pester them or bother them with the details, right? Because that's not really what's important. The important thing is to make the facilitation technique flow and seem natural and organic. Yet in the facilitator's head, they're actually knowingly going through the steps to accomplish their end. They're still trying to reach a goal, right? So I think the way you present or facilitate using the facilitating techniques, when you make it natural and organic, really draws people in and can be very effective in getting people to talk because they'll feel naturally compelled to, or I guess compelled is the wrong word, but they'll have the desire to. So I think it's a great way to get people to want to talk.
Okay. I think that's really helpful, and I'm sure, I think whoever has asked this question, I think his name is Raju. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay. Let me just look at it. I mean, if we have any more questions. Yeah, I think no more questions. Okay. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for answering the participants' questions. Is there any, I mean, do you want to give any message to our viewers today?
Yeah, I really look forward to meeting all of you. I welcome you to come to my session, and I'm happy to answer questions, have conversations, and I'd love to go out after the conference and have a beer with you or just to chat. I mean, I encourage all of you to get involved in the community because we're a great community, and you meet great people and you learn a lot, and I'm really excited to meeting all of you.
Great. I mean, we are excited as well, and I'm sure our participants are excited to meet you as well. And so before we conclude again, let me just reiterate a little bit about the upcoming Scrum gathering. So the gathering is happening on September 6th and 7th in Bangalore, and it is really shaping up very well. The agenda is live on the website, scrumgatheringindia.com. And it has really shaped up with a bunch of workshops and talks, where we have speakers from all around the world. It's not just India. And also, I forgot to mention in the beginning, we have a CSP retreat on the 5th, a day before the conference. And I'm sure all the CSP aspirants, all the CSP credential holders, it's an opportunity for you to join this retreat and learn and exchange, and I'm sure it'll be great. So if there are any CSP credential holders who haven't registered, I think this is your chance to register for the retreat. And again, to remind you all the highlights, we have the coaches clinic, wherein the doctors will be waiting for you to greet the patients who require coaching. And then we have a unique thing. This is your agile marketplace, right? The agile Santhai, where you should not miss this. You have a lot of activities, games, and you will really have fun. I don't want to reveal all the details because I want to keep it as a surprise for you all. And then we have the 2 keynotes. One is from Raj. He actually runs an orphanage, and you will also meet few students from the orphanage who are really in good positions, working in good companies. So I think he's actually Raj. Ravi, not Raj. Ravi is actually a diplomat. He's a pilot and an author, and I think you should not miss his keynote. And the second keynote is like in a different style, wherein you will get to hear to 5 speakers, not just one. It's a mashup style. Again, it's a different one that we are planning this time. And the leadership panel, of course, it will be really interesting to listen to a couple of industry leaders talking about business agility and around the theme of the conference. And I think this is your chance for registering to the gathering. We just have few seats left out, so hurry up if you have not registered so far, and we all look forward to meeting you and greeting you all there. So that said, I think we are good for the day. Alex, again, thanks a lot for joining us today. And to all the viewers, if you have any follow-up questions, please write to us at india.scrumgathering@gmail.com, or you can also put your questions on the Twitter using the hashtag RSGI2017. So with that, I would like to say bye-bye to everyone who have joined the Hangout. And Alex, thanks a lot for joining us today. It was great talking to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye.
Bye.